Good afternoon, and welcome to another Maine GIS User Group virtual Lunch and Learn event. We're talking today about GIS to inspire transparency and trust in a municipal setting. All attendees are in listen-only mode, as I'm sure you're aware. But we will have a Q&A session at the end after our speaker is done. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to use the chat window as we go, and we'll keep an eye on that and try to get your questions answered for you as we go along. When we reach the Q&A session, if you would like to go on mic and answer or ask your question or make your comment live, please feel free to use the raise hand function in the Zoom controls, and we will get back to you. And we just ask that you keep your comments or your questions brief in the interest of time. We try to keep these events to about an hour or so. We're pleased to welcome our friend and colleague Rosemary Mosher today. She's always doing interesting things up in Auburn, and so it'll be interesting to see what she's got for us today. And I'm also joined today by my colleague Patrick Cunningham. Good afternoon, Patrick.
Good afternoon.
And I'm reminded that this is the 1-year anniversary of our virtual Lunch and Learn events. We did our first Lunch and Learn event in May, late May 2020.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can't believe how fast this has gone by.
Yeah. So hopefully we see that the Northeast is doing great with vaccinations, and Maine is, last I saw, was leading the nation by one measure or another. And so I hope we'll be back to live events in the not too distant future.
Absolutely.
So a quick bit about the group before we get started. We are the Maine GIS User Group. For those of you who may be new, maybe this is your first event that you're attending. We are academics and professionals in practitioners in GIS all over the state of Maine, and a very wide-ranging group of industries and disciplines. We are, believe it or not, we're not always meeting virtually. We typically have 2 or 3 in-person conferences per year. We traditionally have a fall conference, a 1-day conference that's held in conjunction with GIS educators around the state. Excuse me, and a spring conference that's typically has a municipal focus. We've often worked with the Maine Municipal Association to bring a municipal GIS track. And then the past couple of years, we've been doing, and sporadically before that, we've done lightning talks at a local restaurant or a pub where we have a little more of a social event, a little more casual, do 5-minute talks. You see in the slide on the left there is Tora Johnson, former board member and education coordinator, doing our popular random slide deck, where you get the opportunity to do a presentation to a slide deck you've never seen before. So it's a lot of fun. People like that. And you'll see at the bottom of every slide, you see our web address and our email address, megugboard@gmail.com, because we want you to get involved. We want you to talk with us about getting involved in the group. One way to do that is to attend a MEGUG event, and good on you. You're here at one right now, so that's great. Another way is to present your work. It could be in this virtual Lunch and Learn format, which is meant to be low-key, conversational, casual kind of thing. If you think you're working on something that was either a great success or a stupendous failure, we'd like to hear about it. The failures are often more interesting than the successes, and so get in touch with us. We'll help you get a presentation together in a format that's going to, that it'll be relevant for people, and we'll help you make it a success. And we'd love to hear what you're up to. Another good way to support us is to become a member. If you are working with spatial information in the state, if you live in Maine, if you work in Maine, or if you do projects in Maine, I know we have some folks from, at least from the rest of New England here today. If you have some tie to Maine, come join the group. And if you run a firm or you own a firm that's working in spatial issues in Maine, become a sponsor. We love our sponsors. It's members and sponsors that help us put on programming like this. So we really appreciate those, and I'm happy to acknowledge 3 of our gold sponsors today. You see them, their logos at the bottom of the screen. They're Quantum Spatial, Blue Marble Geographics, and Esri. So we thank them. And then 2 more things you can do to get involved is serve on a committee or a working group, and I'll talk about a few of those in a moment here. And maybe run for the board if you've been involved for a while. Think about going for a seat on the board. We'd love to have you. We have a number of standing committees that are kind of always happening. We have the education committee. That committee gives away money. That's kind of a cool job. Maybe you want to do something like that. We've got other committees on membership, program, and publicity. The 2 committees that bring this programming to you. So they're busy doing quite a bit of stuff. Sponsorship. If you have ties to the business community and you know who the spatial firms are in Maine, we could use your help for that. And then a couple of working groups, lastly, that we've spun up in the past year, or are about to stand up, are working on issues about the finances of the group and the policies of the group and bylaws. So if you have expertise in any of those areas with nonprofit finances, or with drafting policy or drafting bylaws, we'd love to have your help. And by the way, if you're a GISP, or if you think you might like to be a GISP, these kinds of activities count as contributions to our profession of GIS. So you can be recognized for your work. So we'd love to have you. You come join us. A great group of people. It's a good opportunity to work with folks who represent a variety of different disciplines and different industries around the state. So it's a good group of people to work with. So, and we do have one more lunch and learn coming for, I think of it as this year, but that's not really true. We're going to take the summer off. We'll be off in July and August, but we do have one more talk coming up in June. Paul Smitherman from University of Maine is going to join us about the special collections that now houses the historic aerial photos collection of the Sewell Company, which has a long history in Maine. And so this is a really interesting photo collection. And if you're interested, if you're kind of a nerd as I am, and have an interest in the way places develop over time, it should be a really interesting talk. So hope you can join us on June 22nd. And there is a registration available through our website for that right now, and you'll be more than likely receiving some email about it as well in the coming days. So keep your eyes open for that. And if you can't make that one, or you can't make all of this one today, we do record all of these sessions. We post them on our YouTube channel, which has literally tens of viewers. So we're really hot these days. And so we'll be posting, we post all these sessions on the YouTube channel, and we will post about them, as well as making other announcements on our other social media presences on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. And so maybe do us a favor, if you would, if you see our posts come up, you see our videos come up on these channels, follow us on these platforms, and maybe give us a reshare or a retweet us, help spread the word about what's going on in MEGUG. We'd appreciate that as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Patrick to introduce our speaker today. Patrick.
Thanks, Andy. Well, if you've been involved in GIS in Maine, then you are aware of Rosemary Mosher, our guest speaker today. Rosemary has been involved in the industry for something like 25 years or so. And she's had her hands into a lot of different areas, some notable kind of historical things. She's always been willing and spoken at many different MEGUG events. It's been great to have her. She was involved in the University of Southern Maine's curriculum advisory role for their GIS certificate. Just been, a stalwart in the GIS industry in Maine. And even today, she's still volunteering, helping out with the Maine Geolibrary Board data committee. So the current position is GIS manager for the City of Auburn. She's been there about 9 years. So thank you so much, Rosemary, for your, I think it's going to be a little bit of a demo and a talk. So we're really excited to have you, and you can take it away, I guess.
Thanks, Patrick, and Andy for that great introduction. I'm really happy to be here today and sharing some of the work that we're doing here in the city. As many of you know, I've been working with GIS for, as Patrick said, for about 25 years now, and we here in the city we've been using the ArcGIS Online system since about 2014, but really we have not gotten into in the beginning, we really just started using it for map viewers, the kinds of things that you're seeing here on the screen right now, just the map viewers, the parcel viewers to show zoning, some of the different various things that we're mostly all familiar with. Sometime probably around 2016, 17, we started creating something began to call meeting maps. And those meeting maps are, let's see, trying to find the right thing here and trying to get the, hide the floating meeting controls. There we go. So this is sort of how we started with this. This was a map that we began to use in meetings. It started out where, we're all familiar with it, right? You create a map for a meeting, throw it on the wall, throw it on a table, people stand around talking about it or pointing at it. And we started pretty early on creating a map that used specifically for meetings. They come in one of two varieties. Some of them are very focused and on a specific things, and others are more like this one that you see here, which is what I call the kitchen sink map. I think we've all used that term. Whereas we throw a little bit of every layer that we have on here, and we use them for meetings, and if somebody asks about shoreland zoning, we can go and we can pull it up and we can put that layer on. So we started using those pretty regularly. The first real foray that we had into this started out because our planner, one of our planners, left, and he was the guy that had the desktop experience, and he was able to use ArcGIS desktop and create maps for meetings. And when he left, the planner, the director of the planning department, came to me and said, I need a map for a meeting. And I actually asked him, do you want online or paper? And he said online, and away we went. That was really the start of it. And when I asked him about it not too long ago, he actually said to me, I always thought that if I asked for online, it was going to create more work for you. And it's actually just the opposite. So we now use the online maps for almost everything we do. But it really didn't become what I would call normalized until we started with an ag zone study that we did. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So to start out with, so the ag zone, in some of you have heard this before, so please bear with me, but the City of Auburn is a pretty good sized city. It's 68 square miles, and we have a population of 23,000. I think it's the 5th largest in the state. Back in the 1960s, the folks that were part of the city governance noticed that we were starting to see what we now call sprawl. Wasn't called that back then, but they did some studies, and we set aside 40% of the city, and it's shown here in the light green as what we call the ag zone. It's the agriculture and resource protection zone. It's about 40% of the city. It's about 31 square miles or 20,000 acres. So it's a pretty substantial part of the city. And up until very recently, the only way you could build a house in any of that green area in the city of Auburn was to be engaged in agriculture and had to have 50% of your income from agriculture. This had been challenged for many years, off and on. Back in the 80s, there was a major challenge to it, but it stood pretty tight up until very recently. So a few years ago, they started we had a number of committees, multi-committees, multi-year, very contentious and fairly divisive, situation where they started to examine the ag zone and look at ways that we could maybe make some changes. So we started out by creating this ag hub, which was initially just designed to show us all of these documents. So these are all PDFs. We worked with a number of consultants over the years in the last, from like 2017, 2019, to do a lot of assessments. So we had a map of land cover, we had a map of taxation, ag soils, housing assessment, development, you name it, we had it. So we put this hub out here so that folks could look at these maps. Part of the problem with some of these maps is Auburn is so big that you had to scroll through multiple PDFs, and we had to split the city into 3 zones. And so each one of these covers 3 different maps. And then we started out, we actually put those meeting maps up there. So those meeting maps became part of what the public could actually go in and look at and see. Pretty quickly, we added right here where folks could sign up for email notifications and be notified of a meeting. And we got a lot of response. May not sound like much, but we had 50 people sign up almost immediately. That's a big deal for a city of our size. So, we were pretty happy with that. And then we started looking at various GIS analysis. And so we developed a building permit dashboard. And we started putting these things out there. We created the dashboards and started putting them out there so that people could explore this data for themselves. This is a dashboard that shows the various building permits that have occurred in the city from 2014 to 18. I'm working on a refreshed version of that. There's a couple problems with this, but for the most part, it was a pretty interesting tool. You can see that over the course from 2014 to the 2018, the parcels, and this only shows the parcels that had development on them that associated with these permits. We went from 7.1 million to 23 million in assessed value. So we combined the parcels as well as the assessing database and the permits all into this one dashboard. The interesting thing about this is that, like any dashboard, if you zoom in, you can see certain things. And if you come down here, you'll see that in the southern part of the city around where the Turnpike exit is, the value went from 2.5 million to 13 million. So it was a substantial difference from the southern part of the city to the northern part of the city where the growth was pretty flat. So that provided a lot of really good information. We also realized that, things like we looked at the value for the year before and the year after the permit was issued. We're now looking at 2 years after because we realize it takes a while for that value to actually show up. So that's one of the things that we learned as we went along. Now, the other thing that happened as we started working on this, on the ag zone, is there was a lot of discussion about if we build out that ag zone, okay, so if we start, changing the requirements for building a house from 50% of your income, what is it going to do to that ag zone? So we hired a contractor to come in and start looking at that build out. And, we had created all kinds of charts and graphs, and people would come to the meetings, and there was a lot of discussion and a lot of disagreement and argument about what was going to happen and when it was going to happen. So we created this dashboard, and again, it allows folks to explore the data on their own and draw their own conclusions. So what we did, and it's kind of hard to see because this is pretty small, but we divided the land into the areas that are developable, which are the green, and the undevelopable, which are the blue and the other colors. So you can look at this and you can click on just the developable, and you can see where those parcels are and how many different new dwellings we could potentially put in those areas. It was really interesting as a GIS professional to, I was asked to attend the meeting and present this dashboard and to answer questions and to essentially drive while the discussion was going on. And what was really interesting to me is I've been to several of these meetings, and like I said, they were very contentious. Some people arguing, oh, if we do this, it's not going to have much impact. It will have an impact. Nobody really knew. And once we started opening this up and people could start, I explored it for them in the meeting, and then folks actually could go home and start looking at this. The discussion in the council meetings actually began to change. It wasn't just people pointing fingers, you want to do this, you want to do that, but they actually armed themselves with data. And what ended up happening, which is kind of unusual, is that we came to a pretty good compromise and did come to some changes in the ag zone. And I feel like this dashboard and that in general, this hub where we provided all of this data. Also, you can search. We included things like public comments, all of the public comments, and you could actually search for various data if you want to look for permit information. You could actually pull those things up. So I feel like this had a real contribution to that compromise that we came up with. So from that, we actually, then we all came to COVID. We're all sort of familiar with what's going on there. And I was at home when I got a call and said, can you put together a hub for that? And so we did that. And we put every bit of information that we came up with, all ended up on this hub. And it was, I didn't check the numbers, but it was very well received. This hub got an awful lot of traffic during the height of the pandemic. We had everything in here from, if you scroll down here, you'll see that we actually had, CDC guidance. We put out fact sheets in various languages and videos in various languages. So this became a real source of information for the public. So if you fast forward a little bit, and I'm gonna try to not talk too awfully long because I'd really like to take questions. So please be thinking about questions as you as we move forward here. So if you fast forward a little bit to Auburn's comp plan. So the city began a comprehensive planning process in the middle of a pandemic, which in itself was a bit of a challenge for a lot of reasons, a lot of Zoom meetings, that sort of thing. But we developed much like the Ag Hub, we developed a CompPlan Hub, and we developed it so that we could put it basically is one-stop shopping. So everything related to the comp plan you can find here, whether it's PDF documents or maps, analyses, that sort of thing. One of the things that we did differently here that we didn't do with the Ag Hub is that we tried to get out ahead of it. And so there's a lot of discussion, you may have heard, Auburn is trying very hard to change some of the things that we do in terms of our housing and how we grow. And so we put together a number of data dashboards before we even started the comp plan process. We put those together so that the people on the committee, as well as anybody else who is interested, can look at these dashboards and get a sense of what the housing situation is in Auburn. And so, for instance, this is a dashboard that shows housing units. We went into our assessing database and we added up all of the housing units, basically, whether it's a single family, a two family, three family, whatever it is, to show how many units we've added in the city and where those units are. Kind of interestingly, you can come here and you can select just single family units. And if you look at single family units, we've added a net of 52. If you look at, I'll turn that off and I'm going to add up all of the others upwards through 8 units. And you'll see that we actually lost 52 housing units in those 2 family through 8 family units. This was really informative. It's something that, the folks that even in our planners didn't quite have that information until we presented it in this way, and they could look at it and see what was going on. The other thing that's rather interesting is if you look at the units that are 9 or more units, we actually added 203. So that was really informative to our planners, as well as to all the folks involved in the committees and that are involved in some of the decisions that we're making currently about zoning and that sort of thing. We then took it to the next level and we started looking at school enrollment. And so we combined the school enrollments with the household. So here's all the information on school enrollment, but we also have information on how many households for elementary school districts, middle school districts, et cetera, and combine that with information from the state. And you can look at any individual district In this case, it only changes elementary because we only have one middle school district and one high school district. So you can begin to look at that and do some analysis. So as we start looking at where do we want to grow? Where does Auburn want to grow? We can look at these school districts and see where we have room without having to build new schools. And this has been a big part of what we're trying to accomplish is if we're going to grow, how do we do it in a smart way so that we're not adding additional, having to add additional resources, public safety, that sort of thing. Did the same thing with public safety, looking at how many units are in each district. We're also doing some, we did it for fire districts, police beats, that sort of thing. And we're also doing some work now where we're looking at calls for service and able to associate those to the individual districts. And we'll be doing some modeling to show where those districts, if we moved a fire station or something like that, what would the result be? And again, the city has made a commitment that all of this data, we're just not using it in-house, it's all public so that the public can look at this and they can draw some of their own conclusions. And I find that it's being used because if it goes down or something's not quite right, I hear about it. The other thing that I've started doing on all of these dashboards is, you might have noticed I have an About the Data tab, and I have put in some metadata in here. And I've done that for two reasons. One is because I have folks ask me about it. Where did the data come from? How did you do it? And so that gives me that information. But also I discovered that as time goes on and I look back at that building permit dashboard that I did, I sort of forget what I did. And I have to go back and check my notes. So this way it's all right there. So that has been a really important piece of that. And then as we started going forward with the comp plan, we have, that's the last one I want to see. Let's see, maybe there it is. It's this one. So as we've moved forward with the comp plan, one of the things that's happening is we have a bunch of committees. Now, the CompPlan Hub, and I'm gonna, I think it was Patrick that mentioned, failures and that you learn as much from your failures. Our CompPlan Hub has been a success, but it's also had we've had some challenges. It was developed during the pandemic when we couldn't all get together and talk about it. That was part of it. I was out for a little bit of time because of some personal family emergency. So there's a whole bunch of reasons. We've had some changes, turnover in staff. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but we haven't used the CompPlan Hub the way we intended to as much, where we intended that the committees would be able to go in and have pages specifically for them. That hasn't worked as well as it should, and we need to start working on it. I think really we just weren't ready for that. Our excitement, my boss, who's a communications manager, and myself got really excited about what we were trying to do and perhaps didn't quite communicate ourselves as well as we should. So that was part of some of the issues that we faced. And we're going to be having a meeting actually right after we finish this webinar and discussing the future of this CompPlan Hub and how we're going to use it and how we get ourselves back on track. But we have had it's not a steady path. There have been ups and downs as we go forward. This is something that we created. This was a pretty cool project where this is on the right-hand side here, you will see this is our existing zoning. And this is the proposed zoning changes, the future land use that the Comp Plan Committee is working on. What we did is we created a map for them so they could actually circle things and they could make edits to the map themselves, not actual edits, but they could outline things and say, change this, do that. They would have their meetings in the evenings. The next day, I would have those changes all online. I could go online, make the changes, and republish this map. So this map allows users, and again, this is public, allows somebody to come in and say, well, okay, I see some changes here. So if I click right here, this is going to show me that we are currently zoned as urban residential, and they're looking at making that a traditional neighborhood. And I also just noticed that acres is kind of crazy. They're out too many digits. So that's something that we created and we use as this is an evolving map. This map changes every single week with these changes that are made by the committee. And we get public input. We've had some surveys, that sort of thing. So this is something that has been an ongoing project for us. And so then the last thing I want to show is that as a result of these changes, so you know, if you look at this comp plan, you'll see there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of changes. We had something like 7 or 8 residential districts, probably even more, 10 or 12, and they've done a lot of changes to sort of consolidate that. There were some really minor changes between the zoning, and so they're looking at it saying, okay, we want to consolidate it down to like 3 or 4 residential districts rather than the 10 or 12. So there's a lot of changes in this map, and a lot of things can change. So what we're looking at is we're looking at this same potential development. So where we can show the potential development based on the changes that they're recommending. And this is still in development. This has not been released yet. And we're looking at a number of things, and I'd be really interested if anybody has any comments in any ways they think that this might be useful. I'd love to hear them. One of the things we're trying to do, you know, this is the same thing where you can look at, you know, these units, and actually I may not even have the linkages working yet, but I can look at, you know, the existing potential new lots on a particular type of zoning, and we can see where they are and how many acres and what the potential new lots are. Now, one of the things that became clear as we were doing this is people can get really hung up if I say that there are 5,684 potential new lots. We don't know how many new lots are going to be created. There's topology, there are wetlands, there are a whole bunch of things to consider. So we're looking at ways that we can give people the information they need without them getting hung up on the fact that we can put 22 new houses on a particular lot. It may be anywhere from 10 to 40, you know, depending on the zoning. So we're trying to figure out ways to do that. And one of the ways is I figured out, I don't know how to do much scripting, but I figured out how to do a little bit of scripting and how to round these potential new lots to the nearest 100. So that was pretty cool, but I still haven't figured out how to do it here. I can round it here, but I'd like to I thought about removing these numbers, that sort of thing. So I'm still trying to figure out the best way to create this and to create a dashboard that is usable for folks and provides good information, but doesn't get hung up in the individual, because really what matters is, can you put 2 houses here or can you put 200, you know, whether it's 87 or 100, you know, isn't that important. It's the order of magnitude. So that's something we're still working on, still trying to figure out. So I think that's basically all I have to say here, and I've managed to stay exactly on my schedule of 20 minutes. So I don't know if there are things that, questions that have come in here.
Yeah, we do have a few questions. The first one is from Randy. He says he's known that you've done great work with police and fire for event planning and disaster management. What's new, and are you back in gear for the Maine State Parade? I'm sure of that.
Okay, yeah. Hi, Randy. I actually don't know the answer to that yet. I think the last I knew, the Maine State Parade. So the Maine State Parade was originally scheduled to be held in the Lewiston Auburn. There was a Maine State Parade that was held here many years ago. And for the state bicentennial, there was a plan to have it here again in Auburn, Lewiston Auburn. And the pandemic obviously changed those plans. So we are, I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen here. So we are now in the mode to host that again, but the last I knew, the last update I received was that they don't know if that's going to move forward. What Randy's alluding to is we've done a lot of work with using real-time data tracking, where we were able to put some trackers on folks and show on maps exactly where the parade was. We've lost some momentum on that, but I suspect that that will fire up again if and when that parade is scheduled to happen. And I'm guessing with what's going on now, there's the hope that we will be able to hold it.
Great. Then Tom Hamill was asking him, is the loss of multi-units mostly a result of demolition or renovation / conversion of buildings to another number or units?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I think you'd have to talk to our planners on that. That's one of the things about being a GIS professional, right? We know a little bit about everything and not much about anything. My information generally comes to when I'm presenting at council meetings or planning meetings, and I hear the discussion or a discussion with a planner. So I don't actually know. I know that we have lost some because they've been torn down, and probably should have been torn down, but I don't actually know the answer to that entirely. Good question, though. Something I might find out.
Andy, do you have any questions, or shall I go with the next from the chat?
I wondered, and you can throw this in anywhere if you want, Rosemary. I was curious to know, you had some analyses of total assessed value over the years, and I wondered if those were, well, I was curious to know about whether you had conversations about whether you present those in constant or real dollars versus, versus dollars in the year that they happened. How did that process go? Do you have any insight into that?
You know, that's a really interesting question, and it has not come up. Most of what we're doing has been, we're not going too far back, and so that hasn't really been an issue. But I'm going to write that down, because I'm guessing at some point someone's going to ask me that question, and we're going to get into that discussion. And I do have some work that I am working on where I'm looking at value per acre, actually. It's a really cool 3D presentation that I've been working on for a while now. And I suspect we're going back a ways on that, and I suspect that might come up. So that's a really good question, and one that I'm going to think about. If anybody has thoughts on that, please let me know.
So Amanda Lassard posted a question: cost, premium hub, any additional hidden fees? I'm not sure exactly what that's in regards to.
So you're talking about the hub and the cost of the. So we do have Hub Premium, which allows us to send emails to folks and that sort of thing. We initially got that as part of COVID relief, so that we could try it out. And we've maintained our license. It was not a huge add-on cost. We have maintained the license, but I have to be honest, I seriously thought about dropping it. Almost everything that we're doing with Hub, we're doing it out of the box as it comes as part of your online subscription. So there's very little that we've done that we've had to pay any additional costs on.
Then Kathleen Myers is asking, is the zoning map based on parcels? Is the zoning type an attribute in the parcel layer?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Is the zone maybe it's in the zoning map. Is the zoning map based on parcels? Is the zoning type an attribute in the parcel layer?
No, we actually have a zoning layer that we use. We do have some zoning, we have done some mapping of our zoning parcels, is what we call them, where we can look at the zoning, that attribute that is in our assessing database, but that is not something that we have published. Our zoning is basically just the zoning that comes from the zoning map.
Gotcha. So Sarah Mitchell asked, are these dashboards created in the new ops dashboard, which may still be in beta, or are these created with the older ops dashboard? Also, great work, Rosemary. Love it.
Thank you, Sarah. Most of what we've done, it was created in the original, not in the new ops dashboard, the beta. The last ones that I showed you, which were the housing units and the schools and the emergency, 911 emergency, police beats and fire districts. Those were created with the beta. I was a little nervous about doing it, but I did. There were a couple of features that were really nice. But for the most part, everything was created in the old ops dashboard. I haven't really even explored some of the newer technology yet. Oh, and regarding the bicentennial parade, anybody who's not following the chat, my boss is actually Liz. Thank you, Liz. She has just mentioned that the bicentennial parade has been rescheduled for August 21st, and that the press release will be going out today. So the timing on that was pretty interesting. Thank you, Liz.
So we had another question from Gail. Have you used the dashboards on utilities topics, water, wastewater, transportation, etc.?
I have a little bit, not a lot. I've used it some for wastewater. We are an MS4 community, and so we have to do some mapping there. And we have been using it for catch basin cleanings. So we have a dashboard that does show the catch basins that have been cleaned and inspected, and provides us with inspection information so that our public works folks can jump on the catch basins and can see where they have work. One of the things that we haven't quite gotten to, we had a little bit of a blip with the data collection last year, but we were working on creating a collector app that allows us to see when they clean the catch basins, how full the catch basins are, so that we can then focus our efforts in the areas where the catch basins are the most full in terms of the cleanings. And that, like I said, ran into a little bit of a hiccup because of the data collection last year, but we're hoping to be able to get back onto that. A lot of our water and sewer, we have a water sewer district, so I don't do a lot of mapping in that area. So it's not something that I've been involved in.
Okay, good stuff. For any other questions, feel free to post in chat. Judy or Andy, if you have any other questions you want to chime in.
Yeah, I could ask another one. I suppose I'm curious to know also, Rosemary, how often it happens that you you start cobbling something together for a committee or a working group, and then other people see it, and you wind up having to kind of redo the whole thing because other people have brought.
Oh, that never happens. That
yeah. Or do you
happens.
try to, or to what extent do you try to cover all of your bases as do you try to touch base with a variety of committees before you get started, or how does your development style go?
Well, I think, early on, I would put something together, put it out there, and exactly what you said, I'd have other departments and other folks that would come to me and say, boy, if I wish you could do this. I tend to be a little bit more collaborative now, and tend to involve anybody who might have any interest. Although, sometimes I miss folks. It happens all the time. I'd say I'm going to sort of branch off from that. Probably the single biggest issue that we're having right now is real-time data. We're trying to get to a point, and we're going to actually have our first success, I hope, in the next few weeks with the fire. But we're trying to create real-time feeds like permits. I think I saw something in the chat I was looking at where we're trying to post permit data and post some of these data in more real time than in where you have to go in and rerun the data and repost these dashboards and recreate them. Right now, all of the new ones that I've done, I'm creating models in Model Builder, and so that I can build my data that way and then repost it, and it's a little bit less work for me. But we're ideally working towards real-time data. And like I said, the fire department is really our first guinea pig. We ran into some issues again with the API and how it was created, and they did the company that does our collection for fire department did a refresh of their API, so we sort of stopped and waited until they were finished. But we're working on that, and we're hoping that we're going to have that first live dashboard very soon.
So, Rosemary, thank you for doing this.
You're very welcome.
So how about your building permit data? Do you have a way to connect live to it? Or what are the hurdles you run into when trying to do such a thing?
We do not have it live. That is something that we have been talking about. I think where we're going to end up with that has been a problem. Every time I need to refresh that data, like I said, I have created a model so that now when I want to refresh that data, I just run the model and it will run it through, and I can reload the the feature service and the dashboard will automatically republish. That said, we want to get it a little more realistic, little more live. Right now, it's a report that we run, and then it goes into an Excel spreadsheet, and we do a lot of manipulation of it, and it's just a real pain. But the APIs out of some of these, we have gone, that's one of the issues we've had. The City of Auburn has gone to almost all cloud computing. So almost all of our major systems are cloud-based. And it made it really wonderful during the pandemic. People picked up a laptop and they headed home, and they were able to do almost everything. We're using, all the Microsoft Cloud and SharePoint, all of that. So it was really easy to pick up and go home. But where it became problematic was is getting our data out of those systems. It's not like those systems are sitting on a server in our basement. We have to have agreements with the various companies that are providing. So it has been much more of a challenge than it perhaps would have been a few years ago. So that has become really a problem that we're still trying to work our way through. And if anybody has any experience doing that or has any thoughts, again, something I'd really love to hear from you on.
I totally agree. The building permit data seems to be something that people often ask about getting a live connection to, but it's such complicated data and doesn't always get put into the system in a way that makes it easy to parse out. Like, I only want the single family homes that have actually been built and been given final occupancy permits.
Right.
And it's not always that easy to pull out just the data that you want to make a map from.
Well, and the other thing that happens, and it happens, and I'm not telling tales here for Auburn and some of our issues. I think it exists across platforms and across municipalities and across organizations, that we have a system that can be difficult to get data into, and certainly difficult to get data out of. And so our staff put the data in, and they might make mistakes along the way. When we pull it out and put it in Excel, we notice that there are mistakes and we correct them, but they never get corrected in the original database. And so that becomes problematic. So there's a whole workflow that we need to begin to start, and we are beginning to visit that. And but that becomes an issue as well. This has been done in an Excel spreadsheet for 150 years, and there's not a lot of appetite for making huge wholesale changes to that. And I don't think that's unique to Auburn. I think that's probably exists across the board.
Rosemary, what's the one thing or one of the things every time you go to make a dashboard that you say, oh, I wish it could do this?
Oh, I wish I could do things without having to know how to program. I really do. Like the things, some of the labels and that sort of thing. You and I had talked about. Judy had actually asked me about the rounding piece, and I can't round it. I just don't know how to do it. So being able to do some of that, I think, is probably the single biggest issue that I have. Is being able to customize some of these things without having to know how to do. I was going to say Avenue. Avenue's a while back. What is the new one? Arcade. Yeah. But overall, I've been able to do quite a bit without knowing how to program. And the latest one does have a little bit of programming in it that somebody who knew how to program could probably have done it in about 5 minutes. It took me about 3 hours, but hey, I got it done.
We had a question from Tom in the Q&A, and then there's also a question from Gail. Our question from Tom was, great presentation and amazing products and portal. What proportion of the meeting maps, web maps, etc., that you build start with one of the templates on AGOL? Do you start with templates most of the time, or have you developed your own custom templates?
I rarely use templates. The few times that I have tried to, it hasn't really gone well, because people just want customization. So I almost always start from scratch.
So you don't do anything to even have a kind of a base template that's sort of consistent with your Auburn, you know, style and branding?
We do have some, so I do have some themes out there. So they allow you to create themes. We do have themes. And quite honestly, I have posted here, you can't see it, but posted on my monitor, I have, you know, the hex colors that we use for various things. So I do that. I do often, if I'm doing a map builder or something like that, if I can copy one and use it as a template, I will do that. But for the most part, I'm creating from scratch. I've gotten pretty good at changing colors and making the look, the Auburn look. But that's a really good question. And after you've done this for a little while, you get pretty good at giving it that overall look.
Then we had a question from Gail as well, another question asking, what are your favorite resources for learning new skills in ArcGIS Hub?
Oh, that's a really good question. Mine mostly is trial and error, quite honestly. I go in and I just don't make things public, and I go in and I make a mess of things and delete it and start over. I've done that more than once. I would advise, you know, that you know, make sure you save the copies. You know, I have a copy that in Hub that I've done some really cool things. And so I now have a sort of it is sort of a template where if I have a section of something that I've created that's really, really cool, I will copy the code, the source code, even though I don't know a lot about how to create it. I'm getting a little bit better at HTML. And I will copy that and put it into a hub that I keep just for me that has samples of all these source codes, and then I can pull them when I want them. So that is one way that I do build some of these things, is by creating snippets of code that I put into a template hub, I guess, for lack of a better word, and then I pull them out when I need them, change colors, that sort of thing. But that is, that's the single biggest thing, is just for me, is trial and error. I have used some YouTube videos, you know, the help text, it's okay. But mostly it's just trial and error. And I've been using a lot of the W3, I think it is, tutorials for HTML, which has really helped me with some of the coloring. And, you know, I don't do anything really advanced, but it does help. It's amazing how just a few simple colors and a few simple changes that you make with HTML can make a huge difference in the way something looks.
Great. We have a few more minutes. I want to remind folks, if anyone's interested in hopping on the mic and providing some feedback or asking a question, you can raise your hand in the Zoom tools there, and we'll see if we can get you on the mic if you want.
Yeah, I intentionally didn't make this a 40-minute presentation because I really enjoy these questions, and I think it's a good way to answer the questions that you want to know, not just the things I want to tell you.
Jim, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, Rosemary, excellent presentation. Really, I'm super impressed with everything I've been following you guys, and all along you've been doing amazing things over City of Auburn, and
Thanks, Jim.
I'm really quite envious of the skills that you've acquired through building all this stuff. I'm very inspired, and I'd love to do a lot more of that kind of thing here in Lewiston. It all comes down to resources, you know, what you have time to do. And I just wonder, how do you find the time? You know, that's it's just amazing how everything you put together, and, you know, working with all the zoning data and the housing statistics and the.
I think, you know, I think an important thing, you know, so Jim, yeah, I thank you for you know, being here. And for those who don't know, Jim is my counterpart in Lewiston. He was invaluable to me when I first started in this job, because I didn't really know what I was doing in terms of what we had. And at one point we actually shared a server with the blessing of Esri, and did a lot of work together, but things have, you know, sort of diverged as the city has changed what we do. And, you know, and for those who may not have noticed, my title used to be GIS manager or geospatial database manager. My title is now data analytics and visualization specialist, which reflects the move into the communications department and out of IT, which in many ways I think is a really good move. But the caution that I gave at the time was as we move into more dashboards and more that sort of thing, that, you know, I was concerned about the data. And you can't do everything. And the one thing I will say is, if you compare what Auburn is doing to Lewiston in terms of our dashboards and our public communications, you know, clearly we're doing, you know, a lot of really, really cool things. But if you compare the underlying data, Jim, you got me beat. And so that's what happens. You know, if you don't have enough resources to do everything, something has to give. And I managed to keep it good enough, but it's not wonderful. And that is something that gives me, I'm not super proud of. And I wish we could do a better job of, and I hope that at some point we will. But that is how it gets done, is that it's just squeaky wheel, right? Something, when one thing happens, something else doesn't.
Well, you say, Rosemary, that you know, there are certain things that you wish you could have done differently, or you find not to be perfect. But I think, considering the size of your department, you're not a whole GIS department. You're basically a department of one, and you're doing all this by yourself. I just think it's amazing, and I think that Auburn has an amazing resource in you, in being able to pull all this stuff together and work with different systems. You've got, I think you're still using, are you using Energov right now for your building purposes stuff?
Oh yeah.
So
oh
yeah, we know the challenges behind that.
Oh yeah.
So it's not a seamless integration with GIS, and I mean, far from it. And then your, you know, your CAMA data and everything like that. Trying to, it's all, none of it is seamless. You got to basically manipulate all these different databases and extract, and so to be able to do that, I'm really impressed. So I think, you know, what you've done is just, I just find it to be amazing, and I love it. So
well,
kudos to you guys.
I really appreciate that. We've had a lot of help along the way. I have a lot of, and I do have, you know, there are several consultants that I'm not going to necessarily name, but there's a couple consultants here. One in particular I use for all of my data, one I use for online. And that, I urge everybody that's interested in this to, you know, to reach out. I'm available to anybody who might be interested in working on any of this, these things. Happy to, you know, share screens and help. That's how I managed to get some of this done, is because I had folks that were willing to work with me and to share with me. So, you know, we're a small community, and any way that we can help each other and be successful, I think is, that's part of what MEGUG is about, right? Is sharing resources. And so I'm happy to be involved and help however I can to help others get to using some of these technologies. It's really the first step that's the hardest. After that, after you've created your first couple of dashboards, it's pretty simple. I shouldn't say simple, but it's a lot easier. So.
Well, that brings us to time, and I can't think of a better note to end on. And I agree 100% with Jim. Rosemary, I'm always really impressed with the stuff that you are doing. So thank you for coming and speaking with us today. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, and thank you, Patrick and Judy, and to everyone who was in attendance today and who asked questions. Great conversation. Really appreciate that. And thanks for spending some time with us, and hope you can get out and enjoy some of the beautiful day. And thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.